It's 2026 and I'm back with a new video. Happy New Year to everyone and welcome back to the channel. In this video, I'm going to be telling you about a project that I started last year called RPG Loom. This is a project that is an idle RPG. It may not sound that interesting, and I have to admit that idle RPGs are not the most interesting. However, this is a way for me to test out some systems, test out some ideas, and see what ideas will work. If these systems will work in this game, in this project, then I'm going to port them into another game that, or several games, should I say, if I like what I see. That's kind of the long and the short. In the previous video, in part one of this video, I was talking about how I like to create two documents in order to start all of my vibe coding projects. I like to start with a plan document and a spec document. That's basically the what and the how. In this video, I'm going to talk a little bit about automated development. So this is what you do once you've got your documents created. I've said that you will reconcile those documents and then that you will just ask AI to get started. So your documents are there, they're reconciled, they agree with each other, and you say, okay, please start coding. This is kind of following on from that point. So I'm going to take you through this and I'll show you what I mean. Here is a screenshot of RPG Loom. I think it looks quite nice as it is. Granted, these are not going to be the most attractive graphics in terms of, Call of Duty or whatever, right? No, this is a very simple in the browser. It's all basically text-based, clicking. But this is great for me because this is what I want to test. I want to test systems, algorithms, whether XP rates are correct, whether the rate of gold emission is correct or not. And that's exactly what I'm testing here. There's also some AI things I want to test that will be in this project, not in this video and not in the project at the moment, but they will appear later. The code is on GitHub. However, at the time of recording this video, the app has not been deployed anywhere. I may deploy it somewhere soon such that you can see it as is. However, it probably won't have the AI features right now. I'm still debating about whether I do that, about whether I deploy this to some server where I can also have some AI features. But then, of course, I'm also a bit worried about whether that could be abused, and then therefore whether it's going to run into basically the limits of the accounts that I have with the AI providers, the LLM providers. So, not sure is the long and the short. This game is semi-complete in terms of what you can see here, where you can travel to different locations, you can mine, you can forage for berries, you can hunt, which is basically combat with NPCs. There's an inventory, a crafting system, and then you can wear armor, etc, etc. Again, this is all basically text-based. It is a very simple idle RPG rather than a proper graphical one. So that's an overview of the project. Now let's jump into kind of the meat of what this actual video is going to be about. I'm talking about automated development, and specifically for this project because it's a game essentially, then we're talking about automated game development. So there's the development of the code, there's then the balancing of the systems within the game, and then obviously error fixing. These are all things that you should be familiar with if you're into vibe coding. Now, if you're already into it, then you probably already know about this. And this content may be a little bit basic for you. If you're just getting started, then hopefully this will be interesting and give you a bit of a flavour for what's possible. So this is me inside my IDE. This is the anti-gravity IDE from Google. On the left side, what I'm showing you is my plan document. And whenever I got started with this game, I showed you that in the first video, and it's all of the milestones about how I want to build the game. So here I've already done milestone A and milestone B, and in the document you can see the activities, the tasks of milestone B have been ticked off. So that's what's been completed so far. On the right side, what we have is the AI chat window where I'm chatting to AI, and this is where I would ask, please get started, please build, please check documents, please do the next thing. And so what it's saying is it's saying, okay, well, according to milestone B, what you want to do is you want to add these new things to your game. So it's doing game development for me. It is suggesting, here are some new locations, here's some new enemies, here's some new items. And obviously, the way that it knows to do this is that's all of the data that it's been trained on. So all of the data created by humans that it finds, say, on the internet or wherever else that it finds it, it then comes up with things which sound fairly sort of generic but very applicable to an RPG. Now, that's not to say that this content will be, amazing, highly creative, new. It's not going to be like new and cutting edge. It's going to be perhaps sounding a little bit repetitive. However, it's going to have the right flavor, and that's what I want for this game, where what I want is I want to be able to test the systems and processes and make sure that things are working. I also think it could be interesting content for you, but the game itself may not be particularly new. In terms of the behaviors and the flavors, it's going to be very much you've seen this before. In the bottom right, we have another box which is saying that, okay, and now that we've written the code and we've got this new game data in, then it actually needs to go through the build process and check that the app will build. And that's pretty normal for JavaScript or TypeScript in this case. And again, it's about the automation of the creation of files and then of checking that things will actually compile and run, essentially. Now, the next thing I wanted to talk to you about was automated game balancing. So it's one thing to create these systems for the game, which we can do in an automated fashion, as I've just shown you, but it's another to make sure that the actual systems work as you desire. Now, of course, LLMs don't think as we do. They're not conscious as that we are. However, it has been trained on human data, so it will give you responses that sound like human responses. And that's what's interesting here. So it has written code for the game. It has then written tests. Now, this is not something that I specified. No, the tests were something that were suggested by ChatGPT, because it was ChatGPT that created the plan document. And inside the plan document, it says, okay, let's write tests that will check the balancing of the game. And so here we are. And so now the AI, which happens to be Gemini 3, it's saying, okay, let's do some testing and let's check the balancing of the game. And so it said, okay, you have done 1 hour's worth of gameplay. Now, this was a simulation, so it was obviously sped up. We gained 7,200 experience points, and in that time we also gained 73 levels. And one of the interesting things is that it said that this is unbalanced and that is far too fast. Now, it is certainly possible that we could have a game where that makes sense, and it may be that a player wants to gain, or rather that a game developer wants players to gain thousands of levels, and therefore this makes totally makes sense. Now, it is obviously going to be the case that the levels will get slower and slower as you progress, as that tends to be how these games are, that it's not a linear progression. However, for me, 73 levels within the first hour of gameplay does sound far too fast, and I think a lot of people would say that too. And I think that's one of the things that will be true of games online, like game forums online or on Reddit, that human feedback will be that this is far too fast, something like this. And this is what LLMs are trained on, and so it's giving a very human response. This is far too fast. It's not that the LLM knows, it's not conscious. However, because of the way it's trained, it's able to give an answer that sounds like a human answer. And that's what's really fascinating here. In the second test, it was doing combat, and the player within this died, and so therefore it kind of shows that the system works. It shows that there was combat, and it shows that something happened and that there's logical consequences. However, the testing there could have been more comprehensive and could have shown more scenarios. However, I just thought that that was interesting, the fact that you can do that. So if you're creating a game with AI, these are the sort of things that you could think about. The creating the code, I think, is quite normal and quite obvious. Creating game data, I think, is also fairly obvious, although it may not be to everyone. You may think that the AI can only generate code, but it can also generate a lot more. And here, which I don't think was obvious at all really to almost anyone, is that it can also do game balancing. Will it be perfect? No. However, I think this is a good start. It's the sort of thing where you can say, okay, now as a human, you can take over and you can make that better. You can go in and you can tweak it to be the levels that you want and to get the right speed that you want as a want-to-be game developer, just like me. Lastly, I want to talk about error fixing. Now, I think this one is quite well known. If you get an error message whenever you're creating code with AI, you can always take the error message, copy and paste it, and put it into the chat window. And that's kind of what I'm showing on the right side, except there's a little bit of extra subtlety here because it's not an error message that I copied and pasted, but rather AI has decided to run the build script for this project, and it's seen, okay, in trying to compile the code here, I'm actually getting an error. And it said, okay, well, I should fix that error. And then it goes through a loop, a feedback loop, where it says, okay, fixing error, okay, I need to fix the code, change the code, then run the scripts again, change the code, run the scripts, and so on until it gets to a point where the code has been fixed and the code will run. And then you can open it up in the browser and you can check that the app runs. There are, of course, times where that's not always perfect and where the app may need to be tweaked again, where you may need to give further feedback to AI. However, I thought it was very interesting to see that AI can run the scripts and can realize that there's errors along the way and then act upon those errors without me getting involved. So at several points here, the AI has done the next step in the development process without me as a human getting involved and pushing it and saying, okay, you need to do this. I have been involved at each of the points in between these slides I've shown you. So in between the development and the balancing and the error fixing, I've been involved a little bit, adding in my comments, my thoughts, and trying to steer in the right direction. I do think it's possible that the AI could have done all of that by itself and gotten to an answer. It'd be a different answer from the one that I would have got as a human within the loop, the feedback loop. However, it would have been an answer, and it would have been interesting to see how far it could get by itself without me being involved. Now, it is possible, perhaps not within anti-gravity, but certainly with Claude Code, the CLI tool. There's a lot of people who've been working on that lately, where they've been using, for example, this Ralph Wiggum tool that you may have heard of, Ralph Wiggum being a Simpsons character. There's also a tool with the same name, and it's becoming quite popular. And what you'll find is it can do automated development, and Claude Code will do automated development, and it will check things as it goes. It will run tests, and it will try to run the app and then see what happens, and then try to iterate and then try to add more features as in according to some plan. It's not something that I'm really covering within this video. However, I thought it was interesting and it's worth highlighting and something you should be aware of and something that you may want to go and find out about. Perhaps I'll look into that in another video. I don't tend to use the CLI tools much myself directly for coding. I prefer being in the IDEs for a variety of reasons I've probably covered in various videos. So that's kind of what I really wanted to touch on in this video. I wanted to try and keep it a bit shorter than some of my other longer videos. If you like and subscribe, that's obviously greatly appreciated. If you could also comment if you like short content or longer content, it would be nice to get some feedback as to whether you prefer one style or the other. If you're on GitHub, if you want to send some stars towards my repos, that is obviously always appreciated. There will be another one in the series of RPG Loom, plus a few other projects that I've got in development that I haven't yet recorded any videos for, and I will see you again. Thank you very much.